We definitely have a problem in Australia. It's not the Australia we grew up with.
Now, let me be a little bit racist and sexist here.
From the ages of 6 and 8, that they can change their gender and, the parents don't necessarily get a say and they can have a safe space. And just like your Labor government, their popularity is fastly dwindling and the people are coming out and marching.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's returning, still amazing guest, my friend all the way down under, Steve Christou, who is from the Libertarian Party in Sydney and Australia. How you doing, Steve?
Very well, Nicky, yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Our previous conversation was about Australia allowing the ISIS brides back into the country. And as we had that conversation a few days ago, it made me realise that we've got a lot in common, Australia and the UK at the moment, because we seem to be sinking. We seem to have a class of elite who are running our countries who seem to be doing the opposite of everything that people want. They don't seem to put citizens first. They put foreigners first. They don't seem to be trying to build the economy. They're trying to join a global economy. They've bought into eco nutcases. They've bought into the woke agenda, gender idea. Everything I don't want, this Labour government, and to be fair, the Tory government before this 14 years have been delivering everything I don't want. Is it fair for me to say the same thing's happening in Australia?
The same thing and absolutely worse, in my opinion. We've got politicians and high public servants that can't define what a female woman is. They're teaching gender ideology in classes and they're telling young children, very young children, from the ages of 6 and 8, that they can change their gender and, the parents don't necessarily get a say and they can have a safe space. All this woke tokenistic idiocy polluting our society today and just targeted at degrading family and religious values.
And that seems to be happening across the West. I mean, first of all, they went for God. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I can see the benefit of societies and countries having a state religion, because if you attend church or in a different country, you attend mosque or temple, it's more than just worshipping God. It brings communities together. It gives you a set of rules to follow your life by. It saves you time and energy, always having to work out what should I do in this situation. But you've got rules in a book that tell you how to live your life. And that's extremely beneficial. And then from the 60s onwards, across the West, it was all about destroying the family. We had feminism, we had the LGBTQ agenda, and it was all about kicking men out of the household so the states could raise a next generation of children and raise them to be what the state wants them to be. I've worked for government. I spent 10 years working for a local council in Manchester. You don't want the state involved in your life. You don't want the state running your life. You definitely don't want the state raising your children. But because we've lost God and we've lost the family unit is still disintegrating, that, I think, is one of the major reasons why our society seems to be crumbling apart.
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. And just like yourself, I've spent the greater part of 2 decades working in government departments. I spent 10 years working for a federal member of parliament and the last 9 years elected to my local council. And I've seen firsthand how government interference can destroy families. The breakdown and the isolation of when families unfortunately break up. And, regardless, I think the rules and Australian rules and society are very much slated against the father and isolating a father away from his children. Now, regardless of what happens in the marriage, provided the father has been a good father, not dangerous or violent, we shouldn't have rules that prolong our family separation unit for 4 or 5 years, and these fathers are being marginalised with sometimes false allegations, and not being able to see their children until the matter's addressed in family law court for 2 or 3 years. That's very wrong. And, and fathers that do the wrong thing should be absolutely addressed and dealt with. But 90% of the fathers are innocent of just a family breakdown. And when we've got laws that marginalise our fathers and are designed to break up the family unit, it's just not good. And it's designed to break down our fabric and our values, because children need both parents at the end of the day, not a system, not a government interference that breaks up the family, and then you've got children being raised either by welfare or ward of estates.
No, absolutely. And let's call this what it really is. It's child abuse. When you remove a biological parent away from a child for whatever reason, even if it's a legitimate reason, we still have to acknowledge it's child abuse, because that child will be damaged by the removal of a parent. There's so many reports over 50, 60 years now that all show the same thing. If you remove a child away from its biological parents, you do lifelong damage. You're better off leaving a child with its violent, abusive, neglecting parents than you are taking that child away. That child will do better with those abusive parents. Now, that doesn't mean we just don't do anything. That means we should support those parents to be better parents. But removing children damages those children further, because you break that biological bond, and that psychological damage never goes away. And that in the UK, probably the same in Australia, something like 75, 80% of all prisoners in the UK come from single parent households. That in itself tells the story.
Yeah, look, always when children are removed from their parents, and it's the same here. The statistics show that most of the incarcerated population, whether they be male or female, have come from broken households. Now, unless a parent is physically abusing a child and the child's life is in danger, programs and remedies should be in place to try and keep the child with the parents. Now, but I definitely will not, I don't support an instant, and nobody does. No moral person will support any instance where a child's life is in danger or they're being physically abused, remaining with their abused parents. But I think what we're both trying to express here, that governments are too quick to interfere and remove a child from their parents on, very light and very fallible reasons. And that's what's causing a lot of these issues, because children need both parents ideally to raise themselves and become moral members of society. They need both a mother and a father, because both parents have a role to play in the upbringing of a child.
No, absolutely. Just let me clarify. I wasn't for one moment suggesting we leave children with abusive parents who are beaten going to kill them. Point I'm trying, I
gathered that.
I know the point. I know you go. I don't want the audience thinking, oh, Nick Buckley would leave kids with abusive parents. But those parents are never abusive automatically. They're known to social services for a long time. And our social service in the UK, and I don't blame social workers for this, it's more political, but they fail. We very rarely help parents become better parents. We tend to chastise them. We tend just to tick boxes until we get to the day where we're going to take your kids now. That shouldn't be the only thing we do. We need to be supporting people to be better parents. I've worked with thousands of parents, and I only can think of one parent who actually said to me, I don't care. Even the crackhead mums I worked with would say to me in tears, I want to be a better parent. I don't want my child to turn out like me. I just don't know how to do it. How do I do it? And we need to be helping them. Now, let me be a little bit racist and sexist here. In the UK, we have an opinion of Australian men of being men's men, being tough, being the outback, being tough men. I'm always surprised when I see the woke stuff in Australia, because I always say to myself, how have the men allowed this to happen? Has it happened over decades and decades, just like it happened to UK men?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very disappointing. And you've hit the nail on the head. We're getting an image. We're long gone is the old Australian, real, man's man. You have your alpha. He treats his family well. He can go out and work and protect his family and do what men do. And unfortunately now we are growing up with a bunch, and especially as generations go by, with a lot of soft individuals that are offended very easily. Not your typical man's man that know how to look after a family, raise a household, have responsibilities, And I'm sorry to say, our governments and, and the wokeness that has indoctrinated this country has just had sexed a lot of the men. That's the best way you could say it. It's like, it's like when you gild a horse. Now naturally, not all men are like that. There's still a lot of us that, carry the traditional male role. But when I look at a lot of my colleagues in politics as well, and the nonsense they are prepared to take and just won't speak up, and from people that hate men, from misandrists, and they take this nonsense from misandrists, and they just won't speak up. There needs to be equality and there needs to be a balance. What happened? What happened to everybody being treated as equal? But yeah, we definitely have a problem in Australia. It's not the Australia we grew up with. Things are changing very fast. Men are not being men anymore. As I said, they're allowing trans men to play women's sport. This is how bad things are. Women's competitive sport at a high level. We have a case in Victoria where a men's sexual offender has been put in prison, and because he identifies as a female, they've got him in a female prison. The female prisoners are up in arms. They're scared for their safety, and quite rightly so. But our politicians are standing by this individual and refuse to do anything. That's how bad the state of affairs are.
We've got all the same problems. I think the only chink of light I can see in the UK is we're all beginning to turn on this. We had in Scotland, we had a male trans woman identified, but a man, basically, a man in a dress who was a sex offender. They sent him into a female prison. He sexually assaulted or raped 2 inmates in there. And that brought down the most popular, formidable politician in the UK, Nicola Sturgeon, who was the leader of the SNP and the First Minister of Scotland. It brought her down. And we're seeing the public now turn on all this. We've got a project at the moment called Raise the Colours, where British citizens are going around putting flags everywhere, Union Jack flags, the Union flag. We've got demonstrations on the streets. We've got the rise of Reform UK. Things are beginning to change. Still very early days here. Everything's still the same, but we're beginning to see some hope. We're beginning to see the people turn on the establishment, this government has fallen so fast and so far, so quickly, that it even shocked me. Is anything like that happening now in Australia?
Yes, absolutely. Just like what you described, we're experiencing the same thing here in Australia. People are now starting to turn on the government. And when we've got trans men allowed to play in women's soccer, and these women are being endangered, and they're winning. They were winning games by 11-0, 9-1, 12-0. Ridiculous. We're talking football scorelines, rugby league scorelines, and these women were being endangered, and we're allowing men to go into female toilets. And people have just had enough. They've had enough of the stupidity. They've had enough of the wokeness. We have a government here that recently won 94 seats in the election 5 months ago, one of the biggest majorities ever in Australian history. And just like your Labor government, their popularity is fastly dwindling, and people are coming out and marching at the March for Australia rallies in their tens of thousands because they're just sick and tired of everything they grew up and worked hard for being flushed down the toilet.
Yeah, it sounds very, very similar to what's happening here. I think, the English people, not the British people, but the English people have been far too quiet, far too silent for far too many decades. The Scottish, the Welsh, the Northern Irish are quite used to demanding and shouting and protesting. The English haven't, but the English are waking up now. And then the English are really what make up the UK. So things are definitely going to change here. I can't see our government lasting much longer.
Well, we're in a similar boat. There was always the mentality in Australia, she'll be right, mate, and everyone kept quiet. And, we're the lucky country. Well, they're not saying she'll be right, mate, anymore. people are quite rightly concerned about where this country is going. They're concerned on excess immigration. They're concerned on transgender issues and men being allowed to infiltrate female toilets and women's sporting teams. They're concerned on gender ideology and children being told, little boys being told they can become a female tomorrow, and little girls being told they can become a boy tomorrow, and your parents don't get a say. They've removed the rights from the parents to essentially raise their children in a way they see fit and proper according to their values.
No, absolutely. I mean, every generation has had issues where political issues, the opposite party to you, you'll disagree with most of their policies and they'll disagree with all your policies. That's acceptable and people can handle that. But what's changed over the last couple of years, this last decade or two, is now governments and parties now are telling people to believe lies. And we know they're lies, but they're telling us these lies you have to believe. You have to believe a man can become a woman. And it's like, babies can identify between a man and a woman, a baby. And they're making us live by lies. And I think that's what's getting our back up. These are not political debates anymore now. We need to spend more money. We need to do this. We need to intervene there. They're lying to us and telling us, you must believe our lies.
Well, a lot of our departments now and public servants, they're being instructed. They're no longer able to call females carrying, pregnant females, they're calling them birth givers. Like, what kind of world and ideology? What kind of world and ideology and stupidity are we living under? And we've got people that are prepared to accept this, and this is why we've come so far down the way we have come, because the majority have just remained silent on it, have accepted it, and we don't want to rock the boat, we don't want to cause trouble, we'll just go along with it. But it's now come so far where people are drawing a line in the sand and they're saying, no more. It is starting to turn. It's been a long process, and I believe we have a long way to go still, but people are starting to come out and say no more. And I think the next 2 or 3 years will be very vital in overturning these stupid issues that we've, because if they weren't so serious, it would be a circus act, Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because monkeys would do a better job than this government.
And the scary thing is, it's across the West. It's it's worse than the Anglosphere, but it is across the Western world where we just seem to have lost our common sense. And that'll be a discussion for another day. Why did we lose our common sense? Steve, thank you so much for coming on, talking about Australia. We've got so much in common. I just wish there were positive things in common. Well, some of it is we're beginning to fight back. That's the positive thing we've got in common. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having us, and keep up the good work.
And you. Thank you.